The -40-degree cold did not freeze me as fast as Gavin's smile when he slammed the brakes on Donner Pass. He looked at me not like a husband of 10 years, but like a butcher eyeing meat. "You are insane," he said calmly. The door slammed shut like a coffin lid. Abandoning me in the blizzard, he thought I was alone, but he did not know someone else was watching his deadly trap from the shadows. My name is Barbara Lockwood, and until 2 hours ago, I was the chief financial officer of Aetherios Dynamics, a woman who controlled billion-dollar mergers and managed fiscal crises that could cripple lesser companies. I was a woman of logic, precision, and steel. But as I sat in the passenger seat of our pristine SUV, watching the snow begin to swirl against the windshield like swarms of white moths, I was nothing more than a desperate wife clinging to the fraying rope of a marriage that had been dead for a long time. This trip to the isolated cabin near Blackwood Ridge was supposed to be our salvation. It was our 10th anniversary, 10 years of building a life, a portfolio, and a reputation together. I told myself that the silence stretching between Gavin and me was just the quiet before the reconciliation, a necessary pause before we learned how to love each other again. I was a fool, a highly educated, wealthy, blind fool. The atmosphere inside the car was suffocating, thick with a tension that felt almost physical. Gavin gripped the steering wheel so hard, his knuckles were the color of old bone. He stared straight ahead, his jaw set in a rigid line that I used to mistake for determination, but now recognized as contempt. Outside, the world was vanishing. The Rocky Mountains were being erased by a blizzard that the weather reports had warned us about. But Gavin had insisted we could beat the storm. He said we needed isolation. He said we needed to be away from the prying eyes of the board and the press. I shifted in my seat, trying to find a comfortable position. When something caught the light near the floor mat, I reached down, my fingers brushing against the plush carpeting, and retrieved a small, glittering object. It was an earring, a long, vulgar silver chain ending in a teardrop diamond that was definitely not mine. My style was understated elegance. Studs or small hoops. This was flashy, cheap-looking, despite the likely high price tag. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I looked at Gavin, waiting for him to notice, waiting for the inevitable lie. But I did not say a word. I clenched the metal in my fist until it bit into my palm. I told myself it could belong to anyone. Maybe a client he drove, maybe a detailer's oversight. I was the CFO of a major tech conglomerate. I did not give in to baseless jealousy. I was rational. That was the first lie I told myself that night. The car lurched suddenly, the tires losing traction for a split second before the four-wheel drive engaged. We were climbing higher into the pass, and the trees were becoming sparse, skeletal shapes in the headlights. "Gavin," I said, my voice sounding small in the quiet cabin. "The snow is getting heavy. Maybe we should turn back to the main lodge." He did not look at me. "We are almost there, Barbara. Stop looking for problems where there are none." "I am not looking for problems," I replied, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I am looking at the road. It is dangerous." "You are always so scared lately," he muttered, finally glancing at me with eyes that were terrifyingly empty. "Paranoid, just like Dr. Evans said." I stiffened. "I am not paranoid, and I never liked Dr. Evans. You were the one who insisted I see him for my stress." "And look how good it did," Gavin sneered. Suddenly, he slammed on the brakes. The heavy SUV skidded, fishtailing violently before coming to a halt on the shoulder of the road, dangerously close to the guardrail. Beyond that rail was nothing but a black abyss and the howling wind. "Why are we stopping?" I demanded, panic rising in my throat. Gavin unbuckled his seatbelt and turned to me. His face was twisted into a mask of mock horror. "Put the knife down! Barbara, my God, put it down!" I stared at him, bewildered. What? What are you talking about?" "The knife!" he screamed, his voice rising to a theatrical pitch. He reached under his own seat and pulled out a long, serrated hunting knife, one I had never seen before, and tossed it into my lap. The cold metal hit my thighs. and I instinctively recoiled, brushing it away onto the floorboard. I do not have a knife, Gavin, you just threw that at me. She is trying to kill me, Gavin yelled, not at me, but towards the back seat. She is having an episode. My blood ran cold. I turned around. I had thought the back seat was piled high with blankets and supplies for our weekend, but now, the pile moved, the heavy wool blanket was thrown aside, and a woman sat up. It was Vanessa, my husband's personal secretary, the woman who brought me coffee when I visited his office, the woman who had sent me a card for my birthday 3 months ago. She was crying, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Oh my God! Gavin!" Vanessa shrieked, her voice muffled by her fake sobs. "She is crazy! She was going to stab you! I saw it! I saw the look in her eyes!" "Vanessa?" I whispered, the air leaving my lungs. "What are you doing here?" "You tried to hurt us!" she screamed back, dropping the act for a second to glare at me with eyes full of malice before returning to her role. "I had to hide because I knew you would hurt him." "Get out," Gavin commanded. His voice dropped the hysterical act instantly, replaced by a cold, deadly calm. "What?" "Get out of the car, Barbara." He lunged across the console. I tried to push him away, but he was stronger. He grabbed my arm with a crushing grip, his fingers digging into my bicep. I screamed, clawing at his face, but he didn't even flinch. He unbuckled my seatbelt and shoved the door open. The wind roared into the car instantly, a freezing blast that carried snow sharp as glass shards. "Gavin, please, it is a blizzard. You cannot leave me here," I begged, grabbing the doorframe. "Watch me," he grunted. He shoved me hard. I tumbled out of the high seat, hitting the asphalt with a bone-jarring thud. The ice on the road scraped my palms raw. I scrambled to get up, but he was already out of the car, standing over me like a titan. He reached down and ripped my purse from my shoulder. The strap broke with a snap. Then he grabbed the collar of my thick, down-filled parka. "No, Gavin, no!" He yanked the zipper down, tearing the fabric. I flailed, kicked out, and my left boot caught on the tire rim and was wrenched off my foot. I lay there in the snow, wearing only a thin cashmere sweater, wool trousers, and one boot. My left foot was instantly encased in freezing slush. "My phone!" I gasped, reaching for the purse he held. "Give me my phone!" Gavin laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He tossed my purse into the back seat where Vanessa was now sitting up, calmly fixing her hair in the rearview mirror. He threw my heavy coat in after it. He crouched down so his face was inches from mine. The wind whipped his hair, but he looked completely unbothered by the cold. "You do not get a phone. Barbara, dead women do not make calls." "You are murdering me," I said, my teeth beginning to chatter violently. "They will catch you. Everyone knows we came here together." "No," Gavin said softly, shaking his head as if explaining something to a slow child. "They will not find a murder victim. They will find a woman with a documented history of severe paranoia and schizophrenia who suffered a psychotic break, a woman who attacked her husband and his assistant, forced them out of the car, and then ran off into the woods in a delusional state. We tried to find you, Barbara. We really did. But the storm was too bad." "I am not mentally ill," I spat at him. "I have no record." "Oh, but you do." He smiled, and the cruelty of it struck me harder than the wind. "For the last 6 months, every time I said I was taking the car for service, I was meeting Dr. Evans. Every time you felt tired or dizzy, that was the mild sedative I slipped into your wine. We have built a beautiful paper trail. Honey, 6 months of notes detailing your decline, your hallucinations, your violent outbursts. It is all there, signed and notarized." My mind reeled, the fatigue, the headaches, the times I misplaced documents. I thought it was the stress of the merger. I thought I was working too hard. But he had been poisoning me. He had been gaslighting me systematically, constructing a narrative of madness while I was busy making money to fund his lifestyle. "Vanessa," I croaked, looking past him to the woman in the car. How could you? Vanessa leaned out, looking down at me with a sneer. You are boring, Barbara, and you are old. Gavin needs a partner who understands how to enjoy the money. Besides, Aetherios Dynamics needs a grieving widower to garner sympathy before the stock split. We figured your life insurance and the pity vote would bump the share price by at least 15%. Goodbye, Barbara, Gavin said, standing up. Try not to suffer too long, although, at these temperatures, your heart will probably stop in less than 20 minutes. He got back into the car. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in the hollow of my chest. I heard the lock engage. Gavin! I screamed, lunging for the door handle. It was locked. I pounded on the glass. Gavin, open the door, please! He did not even look at me. He put the car in gear. The tires spun, spraying me with a shower of ice and slush, and then the taillights began to move away. I watched the red glow fade into the swirling white void. It became smaller and smaller, two demonic red eyes blinking out in the darkness, until there was nothing left but the roar of the wind and the crushing weight of the night. I was alone. The cold was not a temperature. It was a predator. It bit into my exposed skin with thousands of microscopic teeth. My left foot, covered only by a soaking wet sock, felt like it was burning in a fire. I knew that was the first sign of frostbite. I tried to stand, but the wind knocked me sideways. I had to crawl to the guardrail to pull myself up. I have to move, I told myself. If I stay here, I will die. I began to limp forward. I did not know which way was the town and which way was deeper into the wilderness. I just followed the tire tracks before the snow filled them in. 1 step, pain. 2 steps, agony. 3 steps, numbness. My mind began to fracture. I started thinking about the quarterly earnings report. I needed to file the 10K form. Why was the office so cold? Who left the window open? I laughed, a jagged sound that was ripped away by the gale. I was not in the office. I was in hell. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. My body shook so violently that my muscles cramped. The tears on my cheeks froze into ice trails. I started to see things in the snow. I saw my mother, who had died 5 years ago, beckoning to me from a snowdrift. I saw a warm fireplace glowing in the middle of the road. It is not real, Barbara, I whispered through frozen lips. Keep walking. But my legs were failing. I stumbled and fell hard onto my knees. The snow felt strangely warm now, soft, inviting. It would be so easy to just lie down, to close my eyes and sleep. The pain was fading, replaced by a dull, heavy drowsiness. Then, through the haze of snow, I saw a shape. It was geometric, straight lines and angles that did not belong in nature. A building. It stood about 50 yards off the road, half buried in the trees. It looked like an old ranger station or a supply shed. Dark, abandoned, but shelter. Hope, hot and fierce, surged through me. If I could get inside, I could get out of the wind. I could survive until morning. I dragged myself up. My left foot was completely numb now. It felt like a block of wood attached to my ankle. I limped towards the structure. Every step was a battle against the desire to give up. Just a little further, I panted. Just get to the door. I reached the edge of the trees. The station was right there. I could see the wooden door. I could see the rusted padlock that was broken and hanging loose. It was salvation. I lunged forward, my hand reaching out for the door handle. Suddenly, the bushes to my right exploded. A hand shot out, a dirty, calloused hand with fingernails black with grime. It clamped over my mouth with surprising strength. Another arm wrapped around my waist and yanked me backward with violent force. I tried to scream, but the hand smothered the sound. I was dragged down into the snow, away from the station, away from safety. I kicked and thrashed, thinking it was a bear or a mountain lion, or maybe Gavin coming back to finish the job. But as I was pulled into the dense undergrowth, a voice hissed in my ear. It was a woman's voice, raspy like sandpaper rubbing against stone. "Quiet," the voice commanded. "Do not make a sound if you want to live." I stopped struggling, my eyes wide with terror. I looked up into a face wrapped in rags, with only a pair of sharp, intelligent eyes visible beneath a matted hood. It was a homeless woman. She smelled of wood smoke and old earth. This was the woman the locals called Old Margot, a ghost story parents told their children to keep them out of the woods. She held me down in the snow, her grip iron tight. "You were going to go in there," she whispered, nodding towards the ranger station. "Shelter," I managed to gasp. "Please, cold." "That is not shelter," Margot hissed, her eyes darting to the building and then back to me. "That is a tomb. If you had opened that door, you would be a pink mist by now." I stared at her, my brain too frozen to comprehend. "He rigged it," Margot said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. "I saw him, the man in the SUV. He rigged the gas line to the door. Boom! No more evidence." I looked at the ranger station, then back at the wild, dirty woman who had just tackled me. The blizzard roared around us, burying the truth under layers of white. But in that hole in the snow, a fire of vengeance began to spark in the frozen wasteland of my heart. "Do not go in there," the woman hissed again, her voice sounding like dry leaves scraping over concrete. "That station is a mousetrap. You are the mouse." She did not wait for my agreement, with a strength that belied her emaciated frame. She hauled me up from the snow, my left foot, the one missing the boot, dragged uselessly through the drifts, a dead weight of agony and numbness. I leaned heavily on her, my vision blurring into a kaleidoscope of gray and white. The wind was a physical weight now, pushing against us, trying to topple us back into the oblivion of the storm. "Move," she commanded, not unkindly, but with the ruthless pragmatism of a general on a losing battlefield. "If we stop, the blood freezes. If the blood freezes, the heart stops." We moved away from the road, plunging deeper into the tree line where the snow was waist-deep, but the wind was slightly broken by the dense pine forest. I had no idea where she was taking me. I was a woman who navigated boardrooms and stock exchanges, whose idea of wilderness was a manicured ski resort in Aspen. Now, I was following a ghost through a hellscape, leaving a trail of blood from my shredded foot. We walked for what felt like an eternity, though it was likely only 20 minutes. The terrain grew rockier, sharper. We were climbing. Suddenly, the woman stopped in front of a massive fissure in the granite cliff face, concealed almost entirely by a thick curtain of hanging moss and snow-heavy hemlock branches. She shoved the branches aside, revealing a black maw. "Inside," she urged. I stumbled through the opening and collapsed. The change was instantaneous. The wind vanished, replaced by a stillness so profound it made my ears ring. But it was the temperature that shocked me. It was not hot, but it was significantly warmer than the outside air. A faint, sulfuric smell hung in the humid air. "Geothermal vents," the woman said, answering my unasked question as she busied herself lighting a small kerosene lantern. The flames sputtered to life, casting long, dancing shadows against the cave walls. "The mountain breathes heat here, keeps it above 50 degrees year-round. Nature's central heating." I looked around. This was not just a hole in the ground. It was a home, a crude, primitive home, but organized with a startling level of precision. There were shelves built from scavenged metal siding, stacked with jars of dried herbs and roots. A sleeping area was raised off the floor on a pallet of pine boughs and old sleeping bags. In the corner, a small natural spring bubbled up from the rock, steaming slightly. The woman threw back her hood, revealing a face that was a map of hardship. Deep lines etched her skin, tanned to the color of old leather, and her hair was a wild mane of silver and gray. But her eyes were lucid, sharp, and disturbingly intelligent. "Let me see that foot," she ordered, kneeling beside me. I winced as she peeled off the frozen, blood-soaked sock. My toes were a waxy white, devoid of color. Panic flared in my chest. "Am I going to lose it?" "Not if I can help it," she muttered. She did not reach for a magic potion or chant a spell. Instead, she moved with the efficiency of a clinician. She grabbed a bucket of lukewarm water from near the spring. Not hot, just tepid, and began to gently bathe the foot. She opened a jar containing a pungent, dark green salve. "What is that?" I asked, my teeth finally stopping their chatter as the ambient warmth sank into my bones. "Bear grease mixed with arnica and cayenne," she said. "Vasodilators. It will open the capillaries and encourage blood flow without shocking the tissue. Heat it too fast, and the cells burst. Basic biology." She looked up at me, catching my surprised expression. "You think because I live in a cave, I am a witch?" "I was a chemical engineer for Dow Chemical for 22 years before the world decided it had no use for me. My name is Margot." "Barbara," I whispered. "I am Barbara." "I know who you are," Margot said, applying the salve with gentle, circular motions. "I saw the missing person posters in town 3 days ago, but the date on them was wrong. They said you went missing on the 25th. Today is the 28th. My stomach turned. Gavin had prepared the posters in advance. "Why did you stop me?" I asked, looking back toward the cave entrance. "Why did you call the ranger station a mousetrap?" Margot wiped her hands on a rag. Her expression darkened, the engineer vanishing behind the mask of the survivor. "Because 2 days ago, I saw a man, your husband, I assume, drive that black SUV up to the station. He was alone. He carried a heavy tool bag." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping. "I thought he was maintenance at first, but he did not fix anything. He went to the external gas tank, the big propane cylinder around the back. He used a wrench to bypass the pressure regulator. Then he went inside and rigged the pilot light assembly on the old heater." I stared at her, horror slowly dawning. "Rigged it? How?" "He set a tension wire from the door frame to the striker," Margot explained, her hands mimicking the mechanism. "Simple physics. You open the door. The wire pulls the striker. But because he bypassed the regulator, the room is already filling with gas. It is not a slow leak, Barbara. It is a flood. The moment you opened that door and stepped inside, the spark from the striker would have ignited the gas." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "It would not have been a fire. It would have been a thermobaric explosion. The roof would have blown off. They would have found your dental records in the treetops, and the official report would say a confused, hypothermic woman tried to light the heater and caused an accident." I felt bile rise in my throat. I leaned over and dry heaved onto the stone floor. It wasn't just abandonment. It wasn't just cruelty. It was an execution. Gavin had not just left me to die. He had engineered a failsafe to ensure that if I was strong enough to survive the cold, my own survival instinct would kill me. He had weaponized my hope. "He wanted to be sure," I whispered, wiping my mouth. "He wanted to be absolutely sure." "He is a meticulous man," Margot agreed, walking over to a pile of junk in the corner. "But he is arrogant. He thinks the woods are empty. He thinks nobody watches the watchers." She rummaged through a pile of electronic waste, old radios, broken phones, and pulled out a small, rectangular object. It was a digital camera, the kind used for dashboards, cracked and held together with duct tape. "I scavenge," Margot said, tapping the device. "People throw away amazing things. I use this to record the elk migrations, or the wolves. But yesterday morning, I was set up near the tree line by the main road, hoping to catch a glimpse of a mountain lion I had been tracking. Instead, I caught 2 different predators." She pressed a button and handed the device to me. The screen was small and scratched, but the image was clear enough. It was a video file time-stamped yesterday morning. The sun was shining. The black SUV was parked on the side of the road, the very spot where he would later dump me. Gavin was standing there, wearing a thick parka, holding a script, an actual piece of paper. Vanessa was beside him, practicing a pose. She threw her head back, fake sobbing, her hands covering her face. "Action." Gavin's voice came from the tiny speaker, clear and direct. "Oh, officer, I tried to stop her," Vanessa wailed, her voice shrill. "She just ran into the woods. She was screaming about the voices." Gavin laughed, lowering the camera, presumably his phone, which he was filming her with. "Cut. That is good. Nessie, but make it sound more pathetic. Remember, you are the traumatized victim. Barbara is the monster. I cannot believe we are actually doing this, Vanessa giggled, dropping the act instantly. She leaned against the car, checking her nails. Do you think the insurance payout will come through before the Italian villa goes off the market? The realtor said there is another buyer. Relax, Gavin said. Walking into the frame of Margot's camera, he kissed Vanessa on the forehead. The payout is $10 million on the key man insurance alone, plus her personal policies, plus the liquidation of her assets. We will buy the whole damn village in Tuscany if you want. Barbara is a glorified accountant. She does not know how to live. She is just a bank account breathing air. What if she survives? Vanessa asked, a flicker of worry crossing her face. She won't, Gavin smirked. And even if she crawls to the ranger station, well, let us just say she will go out with a bang. She always wanted to be a firecracker in bed. I am just granting her wish. They both laughed. It was a sound that curdled the blood in my veins. They stood there, in the bright morning sun, planning my death and spending my money, treating my murder like a mundane logistical hurdle to their happiness. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there in the dim light of the cave, the device heavy in my hand. I waited for the tears to return. I waited for the sobbing, the grief, the heartbreak of a woman whose husband of 10 years had betrayed her. But the tears did not come. Instead, a strange sensation washed over me. It started in my chest, a cold, hard knot that tightened and solidified. It spread to my limbs, banishing the tremors of fear. It was a feeling I recognized from my professional life, but magnified 1,000 times. It was the feeling I got when a hostile takeover was launched against my company. It was the clarity of the counterattack. Gavin thought he had left a broken, hysterical woman in the snow. He thought he had left a victim. He was wrong. Barbara Lockwood, who pleaded and cried on the asphalt, was dead. She had died the moment the car door locked. I looked at my foot. The color was slowly returning, a painful, angry red. I looked at Margot, who was watching me with an intensity that suggested she knew exactly what was happening inside my head. You saved my life, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremble that had been there minutes ago. I saved a life, Margot corrected. What you do with it is up to you. He thinks I am dead, I said, handing the camera back to her. He thinks he has won. He is probably rehearsing his grieving husband's speech right now. I stood up, testing my weight on my injured foot. It hurt, a sharp, biting pain. But it was a pain I could use. It was fuel. He wants a fire, I said, staring into the flame of the kerosene lantern. He wants an explosion. I think I should give him one. Not the one he planned. Not the one that kills me. I turned to Margot. The fear was gone from my eyes, replaced by a glacial resolve that matched the blizzard raging outside. I need to survive this storm, Margot, and then I am going to burn his entire world to the ground. Margot smiled, a slow, grim baring of teeth that looked less like a human expression and more like a wolf sensing a hunt. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, foil-wrapped bar of chocolate. Eat, she said. You will need the energy. Revenge is a calorie-intensive business. For 3 days, the blizzard raged outside the cave, a white curtain isolating us from the rest of the world. Inside, time seemed to suspend. I did not cry. I did not scream. I sat by the geothermal vent, watching the steam rise, and I reconstructed my life in my head. Not the life I had lived, but the life I was going to dismantle. Margot was a silent but efficient guardian. She did not offer empty platitudes. Instead, she offered survival. She changed the dressing on my foot every 4 hours, applying the pungent bear grease salve until the angry purple bruise faded to a dull yellow and the feeling returned to my toes, when I was strong enough to stand without wincing. She taught me how to walk. You walk like a rich woman, she criticized, watching me limp across the stone floor. Heel to toe, heavy steps, you announce your presence to the world. In the woods, you place the ball of your foot first. You feel the ground. You roll. Silence is life. I practiced until my calves burned. I practiced until I could move across the loose gravel of the cave floor without making a sound. It was a skill I realized I would need not just for the forest, but for the jungle of high finance and legal warfare I was about to re-enter. "Why?" I asked her on the second night, as we shared a tin of heated beans. "Why help me? You could have just let me freeze." Margot poked the fire with a stick. "I was an engineer. Barbara, I like systems that work. Your husband, he is an agent of chaos. He breaks the rules of nature. He kills for greed, not hunger. That offends me." She looked at me, her eyes reflecting the flames. "And perhaps I see a bit of myself in you, the part that was thrown away." By the morning of the fourth day, the wind died down. The sun broke through the gray clouds, illuminating a world buried in white. It was time. "We cannot take the road," I said, looking at the map Margot had sketched in the dirt. "Gavin will have alerted the authorities if he has filed a missing person report. The local police will be looking for me." "Worse," Margot corrected. "The sheriff here is Sheriff Miller. I have seen him at the driving range with your husband. They laugh too much together. If Miller finds you, he hands you back to Gavin, or you have an accident in a holding cell. Then we go through the woods," I decided. Margot nodded and tossed a bundle of clothes at me. They were hers. An oversized, moth-eaten wool sweater that smelled of pine needles, baggy cargo pants stained with oil, and a beanie that covered my hair completely. I put them on. I looked at my reflection in a pool of water. Barbara Lockwood, the CFO, was gone. In her place was a ghost, a drifter, and nobody perfect. We hiked for 6 hours. Margot led the way, navigating the treacherous snowdrifts with an ease that defied her age. I followed, placing my feet in her footsteps, breathing through my nose to warm the air before it hit my lungs. The pain in my foot was a dull throb, a constant reminder of why I was walking. Every step was a sentence in the indictment I was writing in my mind. We emerged near the edge of Pine Creek, the small service town that bordered the resort area. It was a sleepy place, mostly gas stations and diners serving truckers and tourists. We stayed in the shadows of the alleyways. That was when I saw it. Stapled to a telephone pole was a flyer. It was bright yellow, demanding attention. "Missing!" it shouted in bold black letters. Below was my picture, a photo Gavin had taken of me at a gala last year, where I looked slightly flushed from champagne, my hair a bit messy from the wind. It wasn't a flattering photo. It was chosen carefully. But it was the text underneath that made my blood run cold. Barbara Lockwood, age 34, last seen wearing a red parka. Caution. Subject suffers from severe paranoid schizophrenia and may be armed. Do not approach. The subject has a history of violent outbursts. If seen, contact Sheriff Miller immediately or call this number. "He is thorough," I whispered, tearing the flyer down and crumpling it in my fist. "He is painting me as a monster so that if anyone sees me, they will be too afraid to help. They will just call the cops." "Panic is his ally," Margot noted quietly. "Do not give him that satisfaction." We found a small convenience store on the outskirts of town. Margot went in first to check for the police. She came back out and nodded. I pulled my beanie low and limped inside. The clerk, a bored teenager scrolling on his phone, didn't even look up as I placed a cheap prepaid smartphone and a top-up card on the counter. I paid with a wad of crumpled bills Margot had pulled from a coffee can buried in her cave, her emergency fund. "Keep the change," I muttered, my voice rough from disuse. Outside, huddled behind a dumpster, I powered on the phone. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I didn't call the police. I didn't call my parents. I opened the browser and navigated to the login page of the Cayman Islands Mercantile Bank. Gavin thought he knew everything about my finances. He knew about the joint accounts, the stock options, the real estate, but he didn't know about the account I had opened when I was 22. Putting myself through grad school. It was my screw you fund, money I had saved from my first consulting gigs. Compounded over a decade of aggressive investing, it was untouched, untraceable, and solely mine. I logged in. The balance blinked back at me. $412,000. Not a fortune compared to what I was worth on paper, but enough for a war chest. Then, I navigated to the public records of the county clerk's office. I searched for filings under Gavin's name in the last 48 hours. There it was. An emergency petition was filed yesterday morning. In re. The estate of Barbara Lockwood, missing/incapacitated. He had requested temporary conservatorship of our joint assets and my voting shares in Aetherios Dynamics, citing urgent business necessity and my likely demise or mental incapacitation. He is moving fast, I murmured to Margot. He is trying to liquidate the company shares before the quarterly meeting next week. He needs the cash to pay off his debts. Debts? Margot asked. Gambling, I realized. The pieces finally clicking together. The late nights, the nervousness. He is not just greedy. He is desperate. He owes money to people who don't send overdue notices. I needed an ally. But who? My friends were his friends. My colleagues were reporting to him now. The police were compromised. I typed a name into the search bar. Elias Thorne. Elias was a private investigator who used to work in corporate espionage. 2 years ago, he had tried to dig up dirt on Aetherios for a rival firm. I had caught him, blocked him, and threatened to sue him into oblivion. But I remembered something about him. He was honest in his dishonesty. He had a code, and he hated Gavin, who had publicly humiliated him during that investigation. I dialed the number listed on his shady website. It rang 4 times. Thorne Investigations. Make it quick. I am billing by the minute. Hello, Elias, I said. This is Barbara Lockwood. There was a long silence on the other end. Lady, that is not funny. Barbara Lockwood is currently wandering the Rockies thinking trees are government agents. I am not wandering, Elias. I am hiding, and I am very sane, and I am willing to pay you 5 times your standard rate to help me prove it. 5 times? His tone shifted instantly. I am listening. I need a safe house, not in the city, somewhere quiet, maybe in Denver's outskirts. I need a secure laptop, a clean phone, and I need you to start digging into Gavin's finances. Specifically, look for offshore transfers in the last 6 months. You want me to audit a ghost? Elias chuckled. I love it, but if this is a prank, I will find you. Gavin tried to kill me. Elias. He rigged a ranger station to blow up. He has the sheriff in his pocket. If you want the biggest scoop of your career and enough money to retire, you will be at the old gas station on Route 9 in 2 hours. Black sedan. Come alone. Done, Elias said. The line went dead. I looked at Margot. I have a ride. We waited in the silence of the snow-covered lot. When a black sedan rolled up exactly 2 hours later, I knew I had made the right choice. Elias was a professional. I turned to Margot. The woman who had saved my life looked small against the backdrop of the vast white mountains. She was shivering slightly. Now that her mission was almost over. Come with me, I said impulsively. I can hide you. I can take care of you. Margot shook her head, pulling her rags tighter around herself. No, the city is your jungle, Barbara. The woods are mine. I would die in a cage of concrete. She reached into her deep pocket and pulled out a small SD card. It was the memory card from the camera. Here, she said, pressing it into my palm. Her fingers were rough, but her touch was gentle. This is your bullet. Do not miss. I closed my fingers around the tiny piece of plastic. It felt hot, like a live coal. I will come back, I promised. When this is over, I will come back for you. Finish it first, Margot said. She stepped back, fading into the shadows of the tree line as if she had never been there. Make him regret the day he mistook a wolf for a sheep. I watched her disappear, then turned and opened the car door. Elias was behind the wheel, staring at me with wide eyes. Jesus, Lockwood, he muttered, looking at my ragged clothes and the scars on my face. You look like you crawled out of a grave. I settled into the leather seat, the warmth of the heater wrapping around me. I looked at him, my eyes hard and dry. I did, I said, and now I am going to fill it. The safe house Elias had secured for me was a nondescript one-bedroom apartment on the fringes of Denver, smelling faintly of lemon polish and stale cigarette smoke. It was a place for ghosts, and that was exactly what I had become. The only light in the room came from the 60-inch television screen mounted on the wall, casting a flickering blue glow over my face as I sat on the edge of the sagging sofa. I had a notebook in my hand and a pen that I was gripping so hard the plastic barrel was beginning to crack. I was watching my husband give the performance of a lifetime. On the screen, Gavin stood behind a podium adorned with the microphones of every major news network in the country. He looked impeccable, yet perfectly disheveled. His tie was loosened just enough to suggest distress. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his voice broke with a carefully practiced tremor. "We just want her home," Gavin choked out, looking directly into the camera. "Barbara, if you are watching this, please, we are not angry. We know you are not yourself. We know the voices are confusing you. Just come back to the cabin. The doctors are ready to help you." I wrote down the word gaslighting in my notebook, underlined it twice. To the world, he was a shattered husband pleading with a mentally unstable wife. To me, he was a viper shedding its skin in high definition. But the real dagger in my heart was not Gavin. It was the woman standing dutifully by his side. Vanessa stood a half step behind him, playing the role of the loyal executive assistant to perfection. She wore a modest black dress, her face a mask of solemn concern. She periodically placed a comforting hand on Gavin's shoulder, a gesture that the cameras ate up. But as the camera zoomed in for a close-up of Gavin's tear-streaked face, the studio lights caught a sparkle at Vanessa's throat. I stopped breathing. Resting against her collarbone was a diamond pendant. It was a solitaire diamond, 3 carats, set in a unique platinum twist that resembled a galaxy. My grandmother had left it to me. It had been in the wall safe in our master bedroom, hidden behind a false panel that only Gavin and I knew the combination to. She was wearing my jewelry. She was wearing my family heirloom while standing on national television, helping my husband convince the world I was insane. It was a violation so intimate, so brazen, that it made the physical pain of my healing foot seem like a tickle. They were not just killing me, they were erasing me and dividing the spoils before the body was even cold. "We have received reports that Barbara may have been seen in the Pine Creek area," Gavin continued, wiping a tear away with a handkerchief. "We urge the public, do not approach her. She is in a state of severe psychosis. She believes people are trying to hurt her. She is dangerous to herself and others." I watched as the ticker at the bottom of the screen displayed the stock price of Ethereos Dynamics. It was plummeting. CFO missing in psychotic break. Stock down 12%. "He is tanking the stock," I whispered to the empty room. I flipped the page in my notebook and began to crunch the numbers. It made perfect sense. Gavin held a significant number of stock options, but they were underwater. If the stock crashed, he could claim a loss. But that wasn't the play. The play was the merger. I grabbed the remote and switched to a financial news channel. The headline confirmed my suspicion. Sterling Holdings rumored to acquire Ethereos Dynamics amidst leadership crisis. Gavin was driving the price down so Sterling Holdings, our biggest rival, could buy the company for pennies on the dollar. He would likely get a massive kickback from the deal, a golden parachute to exit the company while grieving and cash out completely. He was burning my life's work to fund his escape. The lock on the apartment door clicked, and Elias walked in. He carried a grease-stained paper bag and a thick manila folder. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed, but he had the electric energy of a hunter who had caught a scent. "Turn that garbage off," Elias grunted, tossing the folder onto the coffee table. "You are going to want to see this." I muted the TV, but left the image of Gavin's face flickering. "What did you find?" "I found the scriptwriter for your husband's little drama," Elias said, pointing to the folder. "Dr. Marcus Aris. Does the name ring a bell?" "He was Gavin's fraternity brother," I said, flipping open the file. "An internal medicine specialist, not a psychiatrist." He is now, Elias said dryly. Or at least, he plays one on paper. I hacked into his private practice server. It was surprisingly easy. His password was his dog's name. Look at the dates, Barbara. I scanned the documents. They were medical evaluations, detailed session notes, prescriptions for heavy antipsychotics, diagnosis, paranoid schizophrenia with acute persecutory delusions. The dates went back 5 years. 5 years, I breathed, my hand trembling. He has been planting these for 5 years? He has been building the safety net since the day you two got serious about the company going public, Elias explained, opening a burger wrapper. Every time you had a headache? Documented as a manic episode? Every time you were stressed about work? Documented as auditory hallucinations? He didn't just decide to kill you last week. Barbara, he has been planning to have you committed or killed for half a decade. The blizzard was just a convenient opportunity to accelerate the timeline. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the winter outside. I had slept beside this man. I had planned vacations with him. I had trusted him with my life, and all the while, he had been documenting a fiction that would strip me of my rights and my sanity. And it gets worse, Elias said, wiping ketchup from his lip. Check the second section, the personnel files. I turned the divider. It was a list of names. My team, my senior analysts, my compliance officer, my personal secretary, people who had been with me since the startup days. Beside each name was a red stamp. Terminated. He fired them? This morning, Elias confirmed. Cited restructuring due to crisis management. He replaced them all with contractors from a firm owned by, surprise, surprise, a shell company linked to Sterling Holdings. He is clearing the deck. No witnesses, no loyalists, just yes-men who will sign off on the sale of the company without asking why the valuation is so low. I closed the folder. The rage was no longer a fire. It was a block of ice, heavy and solid in my chest. He is destroying everything I built. He is salting the earth. And the public loves him for it, Elias said, pulling out his phone. Have you looked at Twitter, or X, or whatever we are calling it today? I do not want to see. You need to see, Elias insisted, shoving the phone in front of me. I looked. The hashtag Pray for Gavin was trending #1, but the comments under the news articles were a cesspool. She always looked stuck up. Rich people go crazy differently. Poor guy. Imagine living with a psycho for 10 years and trying to protect her. I heard she embezzled money and the insanity plea is just a cover. Ungrateful witch. He gives her everything and she tries to stab him? Lock her up. They hate me, I said flatly. I am the villain in my own murder. Narrative is everything, Elias said, taking his phone back. Right now, he controls the microphone. But we have something he doesn't. The truth? Better, Elias grinned. We have the element of surprise, and we have access. What do you mean? You set up the smart home system in your villa, right? The Nest system? Yes, I said. But Gavin changed the passwords the day he reported me missing. I tried to log in earlier. I was locked out. Gavin changed the user passwords, Elias corrected. But he didn't change the admin root access. You set that up with the installer, didn't you? It is tied to the hardware ID, not the user account. My eyes widened. I had forgotten. I grabbed the secure laptop Elias had provided and launched the interface. I typed in the serial number of the central hub, a number I had memorized because it was my mother's birthday backwards, and hit enter. Access granted. The screen is filled with a grid of live video feeds. The living room, the kitchen, the master bedroom, my home. It was strange to see my house filled with strangers. There were men in suits walking around my living room, holding champagne flutes. I recognized them. They were the board members of Sterling Holdings. They were treating my home like an open house, touching my sculptures, laughing, clinking glasses. He is hosting a pre-sale party, I realized. He is selling the house, too. Look at the kitchen, Elias pointed. I maximized the kitchen feed. Gavin was there, leaning against the marble island, the island I had spent 3 weeks selecting the stone for. Vanessa was with him, The guests were in the other room, so they were alone. Gavin looked different when the cameras were off. The grief was gone. He looked triumphant. He was holding a bottle of vintage scotch, pouring 2 glasses. "To the idiot," Gavin said, raising his glass. "May she rest in pieces." Vanessa giggled, sipping her drink, but then she did something that made the world stop spinning. She put her glass down, made a face, and placed a hand on her stomach. "Ugh, the smell of the alcohol makes me nauseous," she complained. Gavin's face softened, a look of genuine affection I hadn't seen in years. He put his drink down and wrapped his arms around her waist, his hands resting on her belly. "Just a few more months, babe," he whispered. "Once the deal is signed and the wire transfer clears, we are gone. We will be in Italy before you even start showing. The kid will be born a dual citizen, a fresh start, no baggage." "I just worry," Vanessa said, leaning into him. "What if the body shows up?" "It won't," Gavin assured her, kissing her neck. "And even if it does, it will be unrecognizable. The explosion will see to that. We are free. Nessie, we won. We are going to have a family." I stared at the screen, my hand covering my mouth. She was pregnant. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just greed. He was replacing me. He was building a new family on the ashes of the one he had vowed to keep with me. The rush to sell the company, the quick liquidation of assets, the desperation. It was all because they had a deadline. They needed to disappear before Vanessa began to show, before people started doing the math and realized the grieving widower had impregnated his assistant while his wife was still missing. "A baby," I whispered. "They are having a baby." Elias looked at me, his expression grim. "That complicates things. Judges tend to go easy on new fathers." "No," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "It simplifies things. It means he has something to lose. It means he is on a schedule." I watched Gavin stroke Vanessa's stomach, a smile on his face that was sickeningly wholesome. He looked so happy, so unburdened by the murder he had committed. "When is the signing?" I asked, not taking my eyes off the screen. Elias checked his tablet. "The rumor is they are fast-tracking it. The official signing ceremony for the acquisition of Etherios Dynamics by Sterling Holdings is scheduled for Friday morning, 2 days from now, at the Grand Hotel Ballroom." "Friday," I repeated. "It is a high-security event," Elias warned. "Press, security, the whole 9 yards. Gavin will be surrounded by lawyers and bodyguards." I closed the laptop lid, cutting off the image of their domestic bliss. I turned to Elias. "I do not want to just stop him, Elias. I do not want to just send him to jail." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Denver. Somewhere out there, Gavin was sleeping soundly, dreaming of Italian villas and a new life. He thought he was the author of this story. He thought he had written the ending. "I want to destroy him," I said. "I want him to stand on that stage, thinking he has won the world, and I want to take it all away from him in front of everyone he tried to impress. I want the last thing he sees as a free man to be my face." "Friday morning, then," Elias said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I will get the invites. You get the wardrobe." "No," I said, looking at my reflection in the dark glass. "I do not need a wardrobe. I need a costume. Barbara Lockwood, the victim, is dead. On Friday, the monster he created is coming to the party." Returning to my own home felt less like a homecoming and more like a tomb raiding. The house stood on the hill, a modern fortress of glass and steel that Gavin and I had commissioned 3 years ago. It was designed to be a sanctuary, a testament to our combined success. Now, as I crouched in the shadows of the ornamental hedges lining the driveway, it looked like a mausoleum. Elias had dropped me off a mile down the road. I was dressed in black cargo pants and a dark hoodie, a far cry from the silk blouses and tailored suits I used to wear when walking through these doors. The night air was crisp, but I was sweating. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was a cold, sharp stimulant. I checked my watch. It was 9 at night. According to Elias's intel, Gavin and Vanessa were at a private dinner with the board members of Sterling Holdings. They were celebrating the impending sale of my company. They should have been gone for at least another 2 hours. I moved to the side entrance, the one the cleaning staff and gardeners used. I stared at the keypad. Gavin was a meticulous man when it came to business. But in his personal life, he was a creature of habit and supreme arrogance. He would have changed the front door code and the main gate code immediately after reporting me missing. But the service entrance? That was beneath his notice. He probably assumed I had forgotten it, or that a crazy woman wouldn't have the cognitive function to remember a string of numbers. I punched in the code. 4129, the date we broke ground on the Ethereos headquarters. The lock beeped green. A mechanical click echoed in the silence, loud as a gunshot to my heightened senses. I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The smell hit me first. For 10 years, my home had smelled of white tea and thyme, a custom scent I had curated. Now, the air was thick with the cloying, overly sweet scent of vanilla and heavy musk. It was Vanessa's perfume. It was everywhere, coating the back of my throat like a layer of grease. I moved through the mudroom and into the main hallway. The house was dark, lit only by the ambient glow of the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I ghosted my way toward the living room, my rubber-soled boots making no sound on the polished concrete floors. I stopped dead in the center of the room. My favorite painting, a moody, abstract expressionist piece I had bought in Berlin, was gone. In its place hung a gaudy, gold-framed mirror that looked like it belonged in a cheap Versailles knockoff. I scanned the room. The throw pillows were different. The sculptures had been rearranged. My books, rare first editions on economics and philosophy, were gone from the coffee table, replaced by glossy fashion magazines and wedding planning catalogs. A wave of nausea rolled over me, hot and violent. It had been less than a week, in less than 7 days. She had not only moved in, but she had also started erasing me. It was as if I had never existed. I was just a stain they were scrubbing out of the carpet. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the mirror and tear the magazines to shreds. But I forced the bile down. I was not here to vandalize. I was here to execute a mission. I moved to the staircase. My destination was the master suite and the home office on the second floor. The office door was ajar. I slipped inside. This was Gavin's domain. Or at least, he liked to think it was. He sat in the big leather chair, playing the role of the CEO, while I did the actual work in the study down the hall. I went straight to the large oil painting of Gavin that hung behind the desk, a gift he had bought for himself. I gripped the frame and swung it outward. The wall safe was revealed. This was a gamble. Gavin changed his computer passwords monthly. He changed his phone PIN weekly. But the safe? The safe contained the things he did not want to think about. Old tax returns, the prenuptial agreement he had tried to get me to sign but failed, and, I suspected, something new. I stared at the digital keypad. I knew the code he used for the alarm system was new, but for the safe, he would use something he considered permanent, something he worshipped. I typed in the 6 digits corresponding to the date he made his first $1 million. The mechanism whirred, and the heavy steel door popped open. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small flashlight Elias had given me. I clamped it between my teeth and started rifling through the contents. There were stacks of cash, emergency funds. There were passports, his and a new one for Vanessa. I ignored those. I was looking for the company documents. I found the bearer bonds and the original incorporation papers for Ethereos Dynamics. I pulled them out. Then, I reached into my bag and pulled out the forgeries Elias had prepared. They looked identical to the naked eye, right down to the weight of the paper and the watermarks. But the legal language in the fine print was subtly different. These documents, once Gavin signed the sale agreement based on them, would nullify his authority to sell the company and transfer liability for any fraud directly to him personally. I swapped the piles. Then, I saw it. Shoved to the back of the safe, behind a velvet bag of Krugerrands, was a thick manila envelope. It was unlabeled. I pulled it out and opened the clasp. As I scanned the documents inside, my blood turned to ice. It was a project file. He had named it Project Blizzard. It was all there: the blueprints for the ranger station, receipts from a hardware store in a neighboring county for a wrench, high-pressure tubing, and a remote detonator trigger. There were even handwritten notes in Gavin's distinctive, jagged scrawl. Option A: hypothermia, clean, low risk. Option B: gas explosion, high risk, zero evidence. Use only if body recovery is likely. Narrative: psychotic break, accidental ignition. He had planned it like a business merger. He had analyzed the risks and benefits of murdering me. He had kept this file not because he was careless, but because he was proud. It was his trophy. It was his insurance policy against Vanessa. If she ever tried to leave him or turn on him, he could use this to implicate her as a co-conspirator. I shoved the file into my backpack. This was the nail in his coffin. This was life in prison without parole. I closed the safe and swung the painting back into place. Phase 1 complete, I whispered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the bugs. Tiny listening devices no larger than a button. I stuck one under the heavy oak desk, right where his knees would be. I stuck another behind the bookshelf. I left the office and moved to the master bedroom. Entering this room was harder than the office. This was where we had slept. This was where we had made love. Now, the bed was unmade, a tangle of silk sheets that were definitely not mine. Vanessa's clothes were strewn across the floor. A red dress, a pair of heels. I moved to the nightstand on Gavin's side of the bed. I planted a bug behind the lamp. I moved to the headboard and stuck one deep in the crevice between the wood and the wall. I was just about to leave when a sound froze me in my tracks. The low rumble of the garage door opening. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. They were home. They were 2 hours early. I looked at the digital clock on the nightstand. It was only 9:30. Why were they back? I heard the heavy thud of the door connecting the garage to the kitchen. Then voices. Gavin's voice, loud and irritated. Vanessa's voice, whining. I told you I did not feel well. Gavin, the smell of that lobster bisque made me want to puke. You could have held it together for another hour. Nessie, the chairman was just about to discuss the closing costs. They were in the kitchen. I was trapped on the second floor. The main staircase opened directly into the living room, which was visible from the kitchen. I could not go down that way. I looked around the bedroom frantically. The closet? No. If Vanessa was changing, she would go in there. The bathroom? Same risk. Under the bed? Too cliché. And if they dropped something, I was caught. My eyes landed on a small, unobtrusive panel in the hallway outside the bedroom. The HVAC maintenance closet. It was a narrow, vertical shaft that housed the central heating unit and the ductwork. It was tight, dusty, and hot. I slipped out of the bedroom and pried the door open with my fingertips. It was barely 2 feet wide. I squeezed inside, pulling my backpack against my chest. I closed the door, leaving just a sliver of a crack for air. The space was suffocating. Dust motes danced in the sliver of light. The hum of the furnace was a steady vibration against my back. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle the sound of my own breathing. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, angry steps. That was Gavin. Lighter. Clicking heels followed. Vanessa. "Stop being so dramatic," Gavin said. The voices were getting louder. They were coming down the hallway, heading for the bedroom. "I am not being dramatic," Vanessa snapped. "I am pregnant with your child. Gavin, my hormones are all over the place. And this house, it feels weird tonight." They walked right past my hiding spot. I could see the flash of Gavin's suit jacket through the crack in the door. They went into the bedroom. I could hear them clearly now, their voices carrying through the thin drywall. "Weird how?" Gavin asked. I heard the sound of a zipper, then the rustle of fabric. He was changing out of his suit. "Just weird," Vanessa said. "I feel like someone is watching me. I felt it downstairs, and I feel it up here. Did you change the alarm code?" "Of course I changed the alarm code," Gavin scoffed. "You are just stressed. You are letting the guilt get to you." "I do not have guilt," Vanessa replied, her voice muffled as if she was pulling a shirt over her head. "I just want this to be over. I hate waiting for the news. Every time the phone rings, I think it is the police saying they found her." "They are not going to find her." "Vanessa," Gavin said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming cold and hard. It was the same tone he had used when he threw me out of the car. "We have been over this. The temperature that night dropped to -15 degrees. She had no coat, no shoes. She was dead within an hour." "But what if she found the station?" Vanessa asked. "You said there was a ranger station." I held my breath. This was it. The confession. "If she found the station," Gavin said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice, "then she is not just dead. She is ash. I told you. I rigged the gas line. One spark. One attempt to light that old heater. And boom. If the cold did not get her, the fire did. Frankly, I hope she did find it. An explosion destroys DNA evidence a lot better than frost." I closed my eyes. A single tear of pure rage leaking out. Hearing him speculate about my death was one thing. Hearing him actively wish for my incineration was another. He spoke about blowing me up with the same casual indifference as taking out the trash. "That is horrible," Vanessa whispered. Though she didn't sound horrified, she sounded relieved. "That is necessary," Gavin corrected. "We need a body, or at least a presumptive death certificate, to get the full payout immediately. If she is just missing, it takes 7 years to declare death in absentia unless we have proof of peril. The explosion gives us proof of peril." I feel like she is here," Vanessa said suddenly. "Gavin, seriously, look at this." "Look at what?" "The picture frame. It is crooked." My heart stopped. I must have bumped the frame when I closed the safe. "So?" Gavin sounded bored. "The cleaning lady probably bumped it." "No, I feel it," Vanessa insisted. Her voice was rising in panic. "I feel eyes on me. It is like she is haunting this place." "Stop it," Gavin snapped. The sound of his hand slapping a surface, maybe the dresser, made me flinch. "You sound just like her." "Gavin, I hear voices." "Gavin, someone is watching me. Do not tell me I traded one crazy woman for another. You are paranoid. Vanessa, it is the pregnancy hormones. Go take a Xanax and go to sleep." "But—" "Go to sleep," he roared. Silence fell over the room. I heard the bathroom door slam shut. Then, the creak of the bed springs as Gavin sits down. Finally, the lights in the hallway clicked off. I waited another 30 minutes. I needed them to be in deep sleep. The house settled into its nightly rhythm of creaks and groans. Slowly, agonizingly, I pushed the closet door open. I crept out into the hallway. The door to the master bedroom was open. I could hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of the man who tried to kill me and the woman who stole my life. I looked at them one last time from the doorway. They were curled up together, looking for all the world like a peaceful, happy couple. "Sleep well," I mouthed silently, "because the nightmare is just beginning." I turned and made my way back down the stairs. I didn't go out the side door this time. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of Gavin's prized vintage wine, a bottle worth $3,000, and poured it entirely into the sink. Then I left the empty bottle on the counter. Right next to his keys, a small, petty message. I was here. I slipped out into the night, the heavy backpack straps digging into my shoulders, as I walked back down the long, winding driveway to where Elias was waiting. I didn't look back at the house. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a crime scene waiting to be processed. I climbed into Elias's car. "Did you get it?" he asked, looking at my pale face. I patted the backpack. "I got everything. The fraud documents, the murder plans, and I got audio of him confessing to the rigging of the gas line." Elias let out a low whistle. "That is a royal flush, Barbara." "It is not a flush," I said, staring out at the dark road ahead. "It is a demolition order." The office of Richard Sterling was a sanctuary of old-world power, smelling of mahogany, leather, and expensive scotch. It was situated on the 45th floor of a skyscraper in downtown Denver. A fortress of law that few dared to challenge. Richard had been my mentor at law school before I pivoted to finance, and he was one of the few men in this city who feared neither God nor the devil, and certainly not Gavin. When I walked into his private study, bypassing his stunned secretary, who looked like she had seen an apparition, Richard dropped his crystal tumbler. It shattered against the hardwood floor, splashing amber liquid onto his Persian rug. He stood up, his face draining of color, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "Hello, Richard," I said, closing the heavy oak door behind me and locking it. "I apologize for the mess." "Barbara," he rasped, gripping the edge of his desk until his knuckles turned white. "My God, the news. They said you were missing, presumed dead. Gavin is a liar and a murderer," I finished for him, walking over to the leather chair opposite his desk and sitting down. I placed my backpack on the floor, the backpack containing the evidence I had stolen from my own safe the night before. "And I need you to help me bury him." Richard stared at me for a long moment. He took in my ragged appearance, the bruises on my face that I hadn't bothered to cover with makeup, and the cold, hard look in my eyes. Then, the shock melted away, replaced by the sharp, predatory focus of the brilliant litigator he was. He sat down, ignoring the spilled scotch. "Talk," he said. I talked. I told him everything. The blizzard, the betrayal, the gas-rigged ranger station, the fake medical records, the embezzlement. I laid the documents on his desk one by one. The Project Blizzard file, the falsified board minutes, the audio recording of Gavin confessing to the murder plot. Richard read through the files in silence. The only sound in the room was the turning of pages and the hum of the city outside. When he finally looked up, his eyes were burning with a cold fury. "This is not just attempted murder," Richard said, tapping the file with his index finger. "This is conspiracy, fraud, domestic terrorism due to the explosive device, and grand larceny. I can have the marshals at his door in an hour." "No," I said sharply. "Not yet." Richard frowned. "Barbara, the man is dangerous. He tried to kill you." "If we arrest him now," I explained, leaning forward, "he is just a husband who snapped. He will plead temporary insanity. He will use the fake medical records to say he was acting in self-defense against a crazy wife. He will hire the best defense team his stolen money can buy, and he might be out in 10 years on good behavior." I pointed to the calendar on Richard's desk. "Friday, the signing ceremony with Sterling Holdings. He intends to sell my company, a company he has no legal right to sell because I am alive, and the power of attorney he filed is fraudulent." Richard's eyes widened as he understood my play. "You want him to sign?" "I want him to sign the contract," I confirmed. "I want him to stand on that stage, in front of the press and the SEC regulators, and put his signature on a document that sells assets he does not own. The moment ink hits paper, it becomes federal securities fraud. It becomes a multi-million-dollar corporate theft. It elevates the crime from a domestic dispute to a federal felony with mandatory minimum sentencing." Richard leaned back, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his face. "You are cruel, Barbara." "I had a good teacher," I replied. We spent the next 4 hours drafting the legal ambush. We prepared an emergency injunction to freeze all assets, but we post-dated the filing for Friday morning. Exactly 5 minutes after the scheduled signing, we drafted affidavits. We organized the evidence into a bulletproof narrative. While Richard handled the legal paperwork, I handled the board. I used the burner phone to send encrypted messages to the 3 largest shareholders of Ethereos Dynamics: Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Wu, and the representative of the pension fund that held 15% of our stock. These were people I had made rich. They trusted me. I sent them scans of the embezzlement records showing Gavin siphoning company funds into his offshore gambling accounts. I sent a simple message: "I am alive. Gavin is stealing everything. Do not confront him. Go to the signing ceremony. Smile. Shake his hand. Let him dig his grave. Wait for my signal." The replies came back within minutes. Shock, outrage, and then compliance. They would be there. The audience for Gavin's downfall was secured. While I was orchestrating the corporate takedown, Elias was handling the loose ends. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Elias. "The canary is singing." I called him immediately. "Did you get Dr. Aris?" "Oh, I got him." Elias's voice crackled with satisfaction. "I found him at his mistress's apartment in Cherry Creek. I showed him the photos I took of them together. Then I showed him the photos of his wife, who happens to be the daughter of a very mean district court judge. And then I showed him the fake medical records he signed for you." Elias continued. "I explained that he has two choices. Choice A, I release the photos to his wife and the medical records to the medical board. He loses his license, his marriage, and goes to prison for malpractice and fraud. Choice B, he turns state's witness, testifies that Gavin coerced him into forging the documents, and he walks away with a suspended license and probation." "He took choice B," I said, knowing the type of coward Aris was. "He is writing his sworn statement right now," Elias confirmed. "He is terrified. Barbara, he said Gavin threatened to expose his gambling debts if he didn't cooperate. They are all rats eating each other." "Good," I said. "Bring the statement to Richard's office. We will need it for the grand finale." There was one last piece of the puzzle, the psychological break. I needed Gavin and Vanessa to be off balance. I needed them paranoid, terrified, and turning on each other before they even stepped onto that stage. I remembered the conversation I had overheard in the house. Vanessa was already cracking. She felt haunted. I decided to give the ghost a little more substance. I had Elias arrange a special delivery, a courier service, paid in cash, delivered a small, elegantly wrapped gift box to the front gate of our villa. It was addressed to the future Mrs. Lockwood. Inside the box, resting on a bed of black velvet, was a pair of baby shoes, tiny, white-knitted booties, but I had taken the liberty of dipping the soles in red paint that looked disturbingly like fresh blood. Tucked beneath them was a Polaroid photo I had asked Margot to take before we left the woods. It was a picture of the ranger station, stark and gray against the white snow. With a single line of text written on the back in my handwriting, "I know about the gas." I was not there to see it, but Elias had tapped into the baby monitor frequency, another security flaw Gavin had overlooked. I sat in Richard's office, listening to the audio feed on Elias's laptop. "What is it?" Gavin's voice was impatient. "Open it, Vanessa. It is probably a gift from the wedding planner." I heard the sound of paper tearing. Then, a silence that stretched for 10 seconds. Then, a scream. It was a blood-curdling shriek of pure terror. "Vanessa, what the hell?" "It is her. It is her." Vanessa was sobbing, hyperventilating. "Look! The shoes! The blood! And the picture! Gavin, look at the picture!" "Give me that," Gavin snapped. "She knows," Vanessa wailed. "She knows about the gas. She is alive. Gavin, I told you I felt her watching us." "Shut up," Gavin roared. "She is not alive. This is a prank. It is Sterling Holdings trying to rattle us before the negotiation. Or it is that detective you hired who got fired." "It is her handwriting," Vanessa screamed. "I know her handwriting. She is coming for the baby. She is going to kill my baby." "You are hysterical," Gavin yelled back. "Stop crying. You are ruining the night. We have the signing tomorrow." "I am not going," Vanessa sobbed. "I am leaving. I am taking the car and I'm going to my mother's." "You are not going anywhere." Gavin sounded dangerous now. "You are in this as deep as I am. If I go down, you go down. You think the police will believe you didn't know? You think they won't find the texts where you asked how long it takes for a body to freeze? Pull yourself together. Vanessa, put on your face. Take a pill. And shut your mouth. No one is stopping this sale. No one." I took off the headphones, a cold smile touching my lips. They were fracturing. Vanessa was terrified of him, and he was terrified of losing control. By tomorrow morning, they would be exhausted, strung out on fear and adrenaline. They would be making mistakes. "It is done," I told Richard. "The trap is set." Richard looked at the clock. It was 8 in the evening. "You should get some rest. Barbara, you have a big day tomorrow. Do you want to go back to the safe house?" "No," I said, standing up and walking towards the private bathroom attached to his office. "I have one more thing to do. Barbara Lockwood, the victim, died in the snow. The woman who walks into that hotel tomorrow needs to be someone else." I went into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My hair was long, brown, and wavy. The hair Gavin loved because it made me look soft and feminine. I hated it. It was heavy. It was a curtain I hid behind. I found a pair of sharp scissors in the vanity drawer. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a handful of hair and the steel blades crunched through the strands. Snip. The first lock fell into the sink. It felt liberating. Snip, snip. I cut it all off. I cut it into a sharp, angled bob that grazed my jawline. It was severe. It was aggressive. Then, I opened the box of hair dye Elias had bought for me. Jet black. The color of the obsidian rock in Margot's cave. The color of the void. I applied the dye, waiting 30 minutes with the patience of a stone. When I washed it out and dried it, the woman staring back at me was a stranger. Her eyes looked brighter, fiercer against the dark frame of her hair. Her cheekbones looked sharper. I applied my makeup, not the soft pinks and nudes I used to wear. I used blood-red lipstick. I used dark eyeliner to create a sharp, winged look. I put on the suit Richard had his assistant buy for me, a tailored crimson pantsuit that looked like it was cut from fresh blood. I walked back out into the office. Richard looked up from his papers and froze. He took off his glasses and stood up slowly. "My God," he whispered. "You look like a revenge tragedy?" I asked. "No," Richard corrected, a gleam of respect in his eyes. "You look like the CEO of a company that is about to eat its competition alive." I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights one last time. The snow had stopped falling. The streets were clear. "Tomorrow morning," I said, my voice low and steady, "Gavin thinks he is signing a deal to become a king. He doesn't know he is signing his own death warrant." I touched the cold glass. "Sleep well, husband. I will see you in hell." The grand ballroom of the Excelsior Hotel was a cavern of crystal and velvet, filled to capacity with the sharks of the business world. From my vantage point in the concealed security mezzanine, watching through the tinted glass, I counted at least 500 people. There were reporters from the Wall Street Journal, cameras from CNN, and the vulture-like board members of Sterling Holdings, all waiting to pick the meat off the bones of the company I had built from nothing. The air conditioning was humming, but I could practically smell the collective greed rising from the floor. It mingled with the scent of fresh lilies, white lilies, funeral flowers. Gavin had ordered them. A nice touch. He was turning a corporate acquisition into a wake. "Are you ready?" Richard asked, standing beside me. He adjusted his tie, his face grim, but his eyes dancing with the anticipation of the kill. Behind him stood Captain Miller of the State Police, not the local sheriff Gavin owned, but a man with a jaw like granite and a warrant in his pocket. "I have been ready since the moment I woke up in the snow," I replied. My hand smoothed the fabric of my crimson suit. It was not just a piece of clothing, it was war paint. Down below, the lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the center stage. Gavin walked out. He looked magnificent. I had to give him that. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than most people earned in a year. His hair was perfectly coiffed, his posture projecting a mix of strength and profound sorrow. Beside him walked Vanessa. She wore a loose-fitting black dress by Chanel, designed to be chic, but also strategically cut to hide, and yet subtly hint at, the slight swell of her abdomen. She looked pale, her eyes darting nervously around the room. But she held Gavin's hand as if it were a lifeline. They took their places behind the long mahogany table. The CEO of Sterling Holdings, a man named Sterling Vance who looked like a bulldog in a bow tie, sat on the other side, grinning like he had just won the lottery. Gavin leaned into the microphone. The feedback whined for a split second, then cleared. "Thank you all for coming," Gavin said, his voice dropping to a somber, intimate register that made the 500 people in the room lean in. "Today is a bittersweet day. As many of you know, my wife, Barbara, the heart and soul of Aetherios Dynamics, is no longer with us." He paused, looking down at the table, seemingly fighting back tears. A ripple of sympathetic murmurs went through the crowd. Camera shutters clicked like a swarm of cicadas. "Barbara was a visionary," Gavin continued, looking up with damp eyes. "But she was also troubled. In her final months, she fought a battle with mental illness that she ultimately lost. She wandered into the storm, confused and alone. I take comfort in knowing she is at peace now, free from the demons that haunted her." I felt Richard stiffen beside me. "That son of a bitch," he muttered. "Whatever," I said, my voice flat. "Let him dig. The deeper the hole, the harder it is to climb out." "Because of her tragedy," Gavin went on, gesturing to the legal documents in front of him, "I feel it is my duty to ensure her legacy survives. I cannot run this company alone. I am just a grieving husband. That is why I have decided to entrust Aetherios Dynamics to the capable hands of Sterling Holdings. This merger will ensure that Barbara's dream lives on, while I take some time to heal." He reached out and squeezed Vanessa's hand. "And to focus on the future." The crowd applauded politely. It was a performance worthy of Broadway. "Mr. Lockwood," the Sterling CEO said, pushing a heavy leather-bound folder across the table. "If you are ready?" "I am ready," Gavin said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gold fountain pen. My pen. The one I had given him when we got engaged. He uncapped it. The camera zoomed in on his hand. It was steady. There was no hesitation. He was seconds away from signing away my life's work for a payout of $50 million and a clean getaway to Italy. "Now," I whispered into the headset I was wearing. "Copy that." Elias's voice came back, sharp and clear. "Lights out." Down in the ballroom, the massive LED screen behind the stage, which had been displaying a tasteful black and white photo of me with the dates of my birth and death, suddenly glitched. The image distorted, turning into static noise. The audience gasped. Gavin looked up, annoyed. "Technical difficulties?" he asked into the mic. "Just a moment, folks," the Sterling CEO said, waving at a technician. But the static didn't stop. It coalesced. It formed a picture. It wasn't a photo. It was a video. The image was grainy, shaky, shot from a low angle in a forest, but the audio was crystal clear. "If she found the station," Gavin's voice boomed through the ballroom's surround sound system, amplified to a deafening volume, "then she is not just dead, she is ash. I told you. I rigged the gas line. One spark, one attempt to light that old heater, and boom." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. 500 people stopped breathing at the same time. On stage, Gavin froze. He looked like a statue, his pen hovering an inch above the paper. His face went from flush to chalk white in a single heartbeat. Vanessa let out a strangled sound and pulled her hand away from his as if he were on fire. The video cut to another angle. This time, it was the clip Margot had recorded. Gavin and Vanessa standing by the SUV, laughing. "We figured your life insurance and the pity vote would bump the share price by at least 15%, Vanessa's voice chirped, shrill and cruel. "She is just a bank account breathing air," Gavin's voice replied, followed by that distinctive, arrogant laugh. Chaos erupted. It started as a low rumble and exploded into a roar. Reporters jumped to their feet, shouting questions. The board members of Sterling Holdings looked at each other in horror. The Sterling CEO recoiled from the table, pushing his chair back so hard it tipped over. "Turn it off!" Gavin screamed, his voice cracking. He stood up, waving his arms at the projection booth. "Turn it off! It is a deepfake! It is AI! Someone turn it off!" But the video kept playing. It looped the part about the explosion. Boom. No more evidence. Vanessa stood up, hyperventilating, She grabbed her stomach. "No," she moaned, her voice picked up by the hot mic. "No, no, no." "This is it," I said to Richard. I turned and pushed open the heavy double doors of the mezzanine, but I didn't go down that way. I signaled the police officers stationed at the main ballroom entrance. The main doors at the back of the room swung open with a resounding crash that cut through the noise. Every head in the room turned. I stood there, framed by the doorway. The crimson suit blazed under the house lights. I had cut my hair into a sharp, severe bob and dyed it jet black. My lips were painted the color of arterial blood. I stood tall, my weight evenly distributed, my chin high. I did not look like a victim. I looked like an executioner. A gasp went through the room, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the space. "It is her," someone whispered. "My God, it is Barbara Lockwood," a reporter shouted. I began to walk. I did not limp. The pain in my foot was there, a dull ache, but I buried it under layers of pure, cold rage. I walked down the center aisle, the crowd parting for me like the Red Sea. Camera flashes went off in a blinding staccato rhythm, but I didn't blink. My eyes were locked on one target, Gavin. He was standing on the stage, staring at me. His mouth hung open. His eyes were wide, bulging with a primal terror. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. In a way, he was... I reached the foot of the stage. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. I walked up the stairs, the sound of my heels echoing on the wood. Clack, clack, clack. I stopped 3 feet away from him. I could smell his fear. It smelled like sweat and expensive cologne turning sour. "Are you looking for me, Gavin?" I asked. My voice was calm, conversational, but amplified by the acoustics of the room so that everyone heard it. He couldn't speak. He just shook his head slightly, his hands trembling uncontrollably. "I heard you were worried about my health," I continued, taking a step closer. The red of my suit seemed to consume his vision. "You told everyone I was sick. You told everyone I needed help." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the SD card Margot had given me, the original. I held it up between 2 fingers. "So I came back," I said, my voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze helium. "To take my medicine." "Barbara," Gavin croaked. He held up his hands, a pathetic gesture of defense. "Barbara, baby, listen, it is not what it looks like. That video, it is fake. It is a setup. Sterling did it. They are trying to lower the price." He looked around frantically, addressing the crowd. "She is not well. Look at her. Look at her eyes. She is having an episode. She hallucinated the whole thing." He looked back at me, his eyes pleading, desperate, manic. "Honey, you are confused. You wandered off. We have been looking for you. Come here. Let me get you a doctor." He took a step toward me. "Do not touch her," a voice boomed. Richard stepped up onto the stage, followed by Captain Miller and 4 state troopers in full tactical gear. "Gavin Lockwood," Richard announced, his voice ringing with the authority of the law. "You are in breach of contract, and you are currently attempting to sell assets that do not belong to you. And you are under arrest," Captain Miller added, stepping forward, "for the attempted murder of Barbara Lockwood, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and the possession of an explosive device." "No!" Gavin screamed. The facade finally cracked completely. The suave CEO vanished, replaced by a cornered rat. "You have no proof. That video is inadmissible. She is crazy. She is a paranoid schizophrenic." He lunged. It was a clumsy, desperate move. He didn't lunge at the police. He lunged at me. Maybe he thought he could take me hostage. Maybe he just wanted to finish what he started in the snow. His hand reached for my throat. His face twisted into a snarl of pure hatred. "You bitch," he shrieked. "Why didn't you just die?" I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. Before his fingers could graze my skin, a state trooper tackled him. Gavin hit the floor hard. The sound of his expensive suit tearing was audible. 2 officers were on him instantly, knees in his back, forcing his face into the carpet. "Get off me! Do you know who I am? I am the CEO, Gavin screamed, thrashing like a wild animal. Vanessa began to wail. It was a high, thin sound. She backed away, tripping over her own dress and falling onto the stage. I didn't do it. He forced me. I was scared. He said he would kill me too. Cuff him, Captain Miller ordered. They hauled Gavin to his feet. His nose was bleeding, staining his white shirt. His hair was a mess. One of his shoes had fallen off. He looked small, pathetic. The officer spun him around. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs locking into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was louder than the applause, louder than the accusations. It was the sound of a steel trap snapping shut. Gavin looked up, panting, and locked eyes with me. You are insane, he spat, blood on his teeth. No one will believe you. I have the doctors. I have the records. I stepped closer. Until I was right in his face, I leaned in, so only he and the nearby microphone could hear. You had a script, Gavin, I whispered, but you forgot one thing. What? He wheezed. The villain never wins in the final act, I said. I turned to the cameras, to the 500 stunned witnesses, and to the millions watching the live stream. My name is Barbara Lockwood, I declared, my voice steady and strong. I am the CEO of Etherios Dynamics, and I am very much alive. I pointed at Gavin. Get this trash out of my company. As the police dragged him away, kicking and screaming obscenities, passing directly in front of the lens of every camera in the room, I looked over at Vanessa. She was curled in a ball on the floor, sobbing into her hands. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, cleansing emptiness. The storm was over. The wreckage was vast, but I was still standing. Richard walked up to me and handed me a handkerchief. You are bleeding, he noted softly. I touched my cheek, a small scratch where a piece of debris from Gavin's struggle had flown up. A tiny drop of blood. It is fine, I said, wiping it away. It is just a scratch. The wound is already closing. I looked out at the sea of flashing lights. The world was watching. Let them watch. I had nothing left to hide. The chaos in the ballroom did not end with the click of Gavin's handcuffs. If anything, the arrest was merely the opening act of a much uglier, more satisfying play, as the police hauled my husband away, dragging him through the gauntlet of flashing cameras like a common criminal. The spotlight shifted to the woman left trembling on the stage. Vanessa was no longer the poised, expectant mother or the grieving assistant. She was a creature of pure, frantic survival instinct. When two female officers approached her, she did not go quietly. She scrambled backward, her expensive Chanel heels scraping against the polished wood of the stage, knocking over the pitcher of water that had been set out for the signing. I did not do anything, she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. She pointed a shaking finger at the exit where Gavin had just disappeared. It was him. It was all Gavin. He forced me. He said if I did not help him, he would kill me too. I watched from the center of the aisle, my arms crossed over my crimson suit. It was a pathetic display. The loyalty she had shown him in the bedroom, the co-conspirator's laugh I had heard on the video, had evaporated the moment real consequences appeared. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and accessory to kidnapping, one of the officers stated calmly, pulling Vanessa's hands behind her back. No, I am pregnant, Vanessa wailed, twisting her body. You cannot arrest me. I have a baby. Please, Barbara, tell them. You know what he is like. He manipulated me. She looked at me, her eyes pleading for a sisterhood she had forfeited the moment she stole my husband and left me to freeze. I held her gaze for a single, long second. I did not smile. I did not frown. I simply looked at her with the indifference one might show a bug trapped in a jar. Then, I turned my back on her. Get her out of here, Captain Miller ordered. As they marched her past the press, her cries of victimhood were drowned out by the shouts of reporters asking if she had helped rig the gas line. But the purge was not finished. There is one more, I said to Richard, pointing toward the rear exit of the ballroom. Trying to slip away unnoticed in the confusion was a man in a gray suit, clutching a briefcase to his chest. It was Dr. Marcus Aris, the man who had sold his Hippocratic oath for a payoff. He was nearly at the service doors when Elias stepped out from the shadows, blocking his path with a grin that was all teeth. 2 uniformed officers flanked Elias. They didn't need to use force. Aris slumped, the fight leaving him instantly. He knew the game was over. He was led away in silence, his head hung low, shielding his face from the cameras that turned to capture his shame. The trinity of betrayal, the husband, the mistress, and the enabler, had fallen in less than 20 minutes. Richard stepped up to the microphone that Gavin had vacated. He tapped it once to silence the murmuring crowd. The room fell quiet, sensing that the true authority had finally arrived. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, shareholders," Richard began, his voice booming. "My name is Richard Sterling, legal counsel for Mrs. Barbara Lockwood." Effectively immediately, the proposed sale of Aetherios Dynamics to Sterling Holdings is null and void. A gasp went through the room, though it was expected. The CEO of Sterling Holdings was already huddled with his lawyers in the corner, looking pale and furiously typing on his phone, likely drafting a statement distancing himself from Gavin. "Furthermore," Richard continued, holding up a sheaf of papers, "a federal injunction has been granted freezing all assets, both domestic and offshore, belonging to Gavin Lockwood. This includes the contents of the trust established under false pretenses earlier this week. We are also filing a civil suit for the recovery of $3 million in embezzled company funds." He turned and gestured to me. "And finally, I am pleased to confirm that Mrs. Lockwood has resumed her full duties as CEO and chairman of the board, effective this morning. The interregnum is over." I did not take the microphone. I did not need to. I simply nodded to the room. The flashbulbs erupted again. But this time, the energy was different. It wasn't the predatory energy of the paparazzi hunting a tragedy. It was respectful. It was fear mixed with awe. The next 24 hours were a blur of vindication. The police forensic unit and the county bomb squad descended on the abandoned ranger station near Blackwood Ridge. I did not go there. I did not need to see that death trap again. But the world saw it. On the 6 o'clock news, the footage was undeniable. A bomb disposal robot wheeled into the dilapidated shack. The camera feed from the robot, broadcast to millions, showed the mechanism clearly. A high-tension wire connected from the door frame to the striker of the pilot light. Behind the heater, the gas regulator had been removed with a wrench. The concentration of propane in the structure was lethal, the bomb squad commander told the reporters, his face grim. If Mrs. Lockwood had opened that door and triggered the striker, the blast radius would have been 50 feet. There would have been nothing left to recover. That statement was the final nail in the coffin of Gavin's defense. His lawyer had tried to spin a narrative that Gavin had merely left me there to cool off, and that the weather was an unfortunate accident. But you do not accidentally rig a building to explode. That required tools, time, and malicious intent. It was premeditated murder in its purest, most cold-blooded form. Public opinion, which had been so fickle just 2 days ago, swung so hard it nearly snapped. The internet, which had called me a crazy, ungrateful wife, now heralded me as the ultimate survivor. Hashtags, like hashtag Barbara survived, and hashtag the Ice Queen trended worldwide. People analyzed my red suit, calling it the revenge dress of the century. The comment sections were filled with apologies and praise. I cannot believe I doubted her. She is a legend. The way she walked into that room. Chills. Gavin Lockwood deserves to rot. What a monster. I read the comments on my tablet as I sat in my office the next morning. My real office. The staff who had been fired were rehired with a 20% raise and a personal apology from me. The contractors Gavin had brought in were escorted out by security. "They love you," Elias said, sitting on the edge of my desk, tossing a grape into his mouth. "You are polling higher than the president." "They do not love me," I said, putting the tablet down. "They love the story. They love that I survived. If I had died, they would have loved the tragedy just as much. It is all consumption to them. I stood up and walked to the window. Is the bail hearing over? Just finished, Elias confirmed. Denied. The judge cited the offshore accounts, the Italian villa, and the sheer depravity of the crime. Gavin is sitting in the county lockup until trial, and given the evidence, he is looking at life without parole, possibly consecutive sentences. I want to see him, I said. Elias frowned. Why? You won, Barbara? Let him rot. I won the war, I said, turning to face him. But I never got to say goodbye to the casualty. Casualty? The man I thought I married, I said. He needs to be buried properly. The county detention center was a stark contrast to the luxury of the hotel ballroom. It smelled of bleach and despair. I was escorted by the warden himself, a man who treated me with a deference that bordered on nervousness. I was led to a private visitation room. It was a small concrete box divided by a thick pane of bulletproof glass. On one side was a metal stool bolted to the floor. On the other side, a heavy steel door. I sat down. I was still wearing the crimson suit. I wanted him to see it. I wanted it to be the last image burned into his retinas. The door on the other side buzzed and opened. 2 guards led Gavin in. He looked terrible. The confident, handsome man who had stood on the stage was gone. In his place was a man who had aged 10 years in 2 days. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was too big for him. His hair was matted. His face was gray and unshaven. He shuffled in shackles, the chains clinking against the floor. He sat down slowly. He did not look at me at first. He looked at his hands, which were clasped together on the metal ledge. "Hello, Gavin," I said. My voice seemed to jolt him. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. When he saw me, a flicker of something passed through his face. Not anger, desperation. "Barbara," he whispered. His voice was hoarse. "Barbara, thank God you came." "I came to see if the prison orange suited you," I said calmly. "It clashes with your skin tone." "Please," he said, leaning forward until his forehead rested against the glass. "Please, do not do this. You have to help me. I cannot stay here. They know who I am. The other inmates. They know I have money. I am in danger." "You do not have money. Gavin," I corrected him. "You have $0. Your accounts are frozen. The offshore funds have been repatriated. The villa in Italy is being seized to pay for the legal fees and the civil suit I filed against you. You are destitute." "We can fix this," he pleaded, tears beginning to track through the grime on his cheeks. "Barbara, listen to me. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But 10 years. We have been together for 10 years. Does that mean nothing to you? We built a life. We were a team." I watched him cry. I waited for a pang of sympathy. I waited for the old love to stir, the instinct to comfort him that had been my default mode for a decade. But there was nothing, just a vast Arctic silence in my chest. "I made a mistake," he sobbed. "I was stressed. The debts, the gambling. I was not thinking straight. And Vanessa, she twisted my head. She made me think it was the only way. It was her idea. Barbara, she is the evil one." "Stop," I said. It wasn't a shout. It was a simple command, but it cut through his blubbering like a knife. "Do not blame the mistress for the husband's sin," I said. "I saw the video. Gavin, I heard you. You laughed. You laughed about blowing me up. You called me a bank account breathing air." "I was acting," he lied, desperate. "I was just playing along to keep her happy until I could figure out a way out." 10 years, I repeated his words, tasting them. "You asked if 10 years meant nothing to me." I leaned forward, my face inches from the glass. I looked deep into his eyes, searching for the man I had loved. I saw the same color irises. I saw the same shape of the nose. But the soul behind them was unrecognizable. It was a black hole of need and selfishness. "For 10 years, I said softly. "I thought I was building a castle. I worked 18-hour days. I managed the crises. I smoothed the road for you so you could play the big-shot CEO. I thought we were partners." "We were," Gavin cried. We still can be. No, I shook my head. We were never partners. I was the host. You were the parasite. Gavin flinched as if I had slapped him. You fed on my success, I continued, my voice devoid of emotion. You fed on my energy. You fed on my love. And when you thought you had sucked me dry, you tried to discard the husk, but you forgot one thing about parasites. Gavin, they cannot survive without the host. But the host? I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my red pants. The host gets healthier the moment the parasite is removed. Barbara, no! Gavin slammed his hand against the glass. Do not walk away. You cannot leave me here. I will die here. I turned my back on him. Barbara, he screamed. I am your husband. I love you. Barbara. His screams echoed off the concrete walls, a raw animal sound of terror. I walked toward the heavy steel door. The guard buzzed it open for me. I stepped out into the hallway. The heavy metal door slammed shut behind me with a final, resonant clang, cutting off his voice instantly. Silence. I took a deep breath. The air in the hallway was stale. But to me, it tasted like oxygen. It tasted like freedom. I walked out of the prison and into the bright afternoon sunlight. Elias was waiting by the car. He looked at me, gauging my reaction. Are you okay? He asked. I looked at the sun, letting the warmth hit my face. I am perfect, I said. Let's go home. The snow had finally melted. It took 4 months for the seasons to turn, for the white shroud of winter to retreat back to the highest peaks of the Rockies, revealing the bruised but living earth beneath. In those 4 months, my life had undergone a thaw of its own. The headlines had faded, replaced by the next scandal, the next corporate merger, the next tragedy. But the silence that followed the noise was not empty. It was filled with a purpose I had never known before. I sat in my office at Ethereos Dynamics. The glass walls no longer felt like a fishbowl where I was on display. They felt like a vantage point. The company was thriving. The stock had rebounded and then surpassed its previous highs, driven not by speculation, but by the market's confidence in a leader who had literally walked out of a grave to reclaim her throne. I was different now. The hesitation was gone. The need to please, to soften my edges so as not to intimidate the men in the room, had evaporated. When I spoke, the boardroom fell silent, not out of fear, though there was a healthy dose of that, but out of respect. I made decisions with the clarity of someone who knew that the worst-case scenario wasn't a quarterly loss, it was dying alone in the cold. But there was one piece of business left unfinished, one debt that could not be paid via wire transfer. I canceled my meetings for the afternoon. I told my new assistant, a sharp, capable young woman named Sarah who actually did her job, that I would be unreachable for the rest of the day. I drove the SUV myself, not the black one Gavin had driven that night. I had that crushed into a cube of scrap metal, but a sturdy silver Land Rover. I drove west, watching the city give way to the foothills, and the foothills rise into the mountains. The road to Blackwood Ridge was different in the late spring. The aspen trees were shivering with new green leaves. The air didn't bite, it kissed. I parked the car at the trailhead, miles away from the cursed spot where I had been thrown out. I hiked in. My foot was fully healed, though it ached when the barometric pressure dropped, a permanent reminder of the frost. I moved through the woods, not with the desperate scrambling of a victim, but with the quiet reverence of a guest. I remembered the lessons: heel to toe, feel the ground, listen to the silence. I found the fissure in the rock wall. The moss was thicker now, lush and vibrant. "Margot?" I called out softly. There was no answer, but I knew she was there. I could smell the faint scent of wood smoke and dried sage. I stepped through the curtain of vines. She was sitting by the geothermal vent, whittling a piece of cedar. She looked exactly the same. The layers of mismatched clothes, the wild gray hair, the face etched with the history of 1,000 hard winters. She didn't look up as I entered. "You walk better," she said, her voice raspy and familiar. "Less like a cow, more like a deer." "I had a good teacher," I replied, setting my backpack down on the stone floor. Margot finally looked up. Her eyes were sharp, scanning me for threats, for pity, for the things she hated about the civilized world. You finished your war, then? I did, I said. The enemy is in a cage. The kingdom is secure. And yet, you are back here, Margot grunted, returning to her whittling. Usually, when people get what they want, they forget where they came from, especially the rich ones. I did not come to offer you charity. Margot, I said, sitting down on a flat rock opposite her. I knew better than to offer her money. Money was paper to her, fuel for the fire. It was an insult to the sovereignty she had carved out for herself in the wild. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick leather binder. I slid it across the stone floor toward her. What is this? She asked, eyeing it suspiciously. It is a deed, I explained. 2 weeks ago, I purchased the land surrounding Blackwood Ridge, all of it, 3,000 acres of forest, cliffs, and river. I bought it from the state and 3 private developers who were planning to turn this valley into a luxury ski resort. Margot's knife stopped moving. She stared at the binder. I have reclassified the land, I continued. It is no longer designated for commercial or residential use. It is now the Blackwood Private Nature Reserve. It is a protected sanctuary. No logging, no hunting, no tourists, no hotels. Margot slowly reached out and opened the binder. She looked at the maps, the legal stamps, the boundaries drawn in red ink that encompassed her entire world. Why? She whispered. Because you saved my life, I said, and because you belong here. But I know you worry about being found. You worry about rangers kicking you out or hikers stumbling upon your cave. That ends today. I pointed to a specific paragraph on the second page. I have appointed you as the official warden and caretaker of the reserve. It is a lifetime appointment with full legal authority to reside on the land. You are not a squatter anymore, Margot. You are the landlord. Nobody can move you. Nobody can touch you. If anyone comes here, you have the legal right to tell them to leave. Margot ran a dirty finger over the embossed seal of the county clerk. Her hand was trembling slightly. For a woman who had faced blizzards and bears without blinking, the concept of safety seemed to shake her. There is one more thing, I said. Come with me. She hesitated, then stood up. We walked out of the cave and hiked about half a mile up the ridge, to a small plateau that overlooked the valley. It was a spot Margot had taken me to once, to show me where the eagles nested. Nestled into the tree line, almost invisible until you were right on top of it, was a cabin. It was not a sprawling vacation home. It was small, compact, and built from dark, treated timber that blended perfectly with the pine forest. I had my engineers design it, I said as Margot stared, mouth slightly open. I told them I wanted something that a chemical engineer would appreciate. It is fully off-grid. The roof is made of solar tiles that feed into a Tesla power wall buried in the foundation. It has a rainwater filtration system that purifies water to laboratory standards. It has a wood-burning stove for heat, but also radiant floor heating powered by the solar bank for the deep winter nights. I walked to the door and keyed in a code. The lock clicked open. No internet, I said, opening the door. No phone line, no connection to the outside world unless you want it. Just warmth, safety, and privacy. Margot walked inside. She touched the smooth wood of the walls. She looked at the small kitchenette with its propane stove, the comfortable bed with thick wool blankets, the wall of bookshelves waiting to be filled. It was simple, functional, and dignified. It was a home for a human being, not a hole for an animal. She turned to me. Her eyes were wet. I do not pay rent, she said, her voice thick with emotion. The rent is paid. I smiled. The price was one life, saved in a snowstorm. I think we are square. Margot looked at me, and then, slowly, the corners of her mouth turned up. It wasn't a smirk or a grimace. It was a genuine smile. It crinkled the corners of her eyes and transformed her face. For a moment, I saw the woman she used to be, the bright, young engineer before the world broke her. Tea, she said suddenly. I found some wild chamomile and mint. We should drink tea. We sat on the porch of the little cabin, sitting in 2 wooden rocking chairs I had placed there. We held mugs of steaming, fragrant tea, watching the sun dip below the peaks of the Rockies. The snow on the distant caps was turning pink and gold in the twilight. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. We were 2 women from opposite ends of the earth, one draped in silk and power, the other in rags and resilience. But we were bound by the shared knowledge of what it meant to survive the cold. We drank our tea, and I felt a peace settle over me that no board meeting or stock rally could ever provide. "You did good, Barbara," Margot said softly, looking out at her kingdom. "I had to," I replied. "I couldn't leave the woods without leaving a guardian." "I will watch it," she promised. "I will watch it all." "I know you will," I said. "That is actually what gave me the idea for the name." "The name?" "The foundation," I explained. "I established a nonprofit organization last week. It is funded by the money I recovered from the lawsuit against Gavin. Plus a significant personal endowment, it is dedicated to providing legal aid, safe housing, and psychological support for women who are victims of gaslighting, financial abuse, and domestic manipulation. We help them escape before it is too late. We help them prove they are not crazy." I looked at Margot, who was watching me intently. "I named it the Watcher Foundation," I said, "because you were watching when no one else was. Because you saw the truth when everyone else saw a lie. I want to make sure no other woman is left out in the cold without someone watching over her." Margot nodded slowly. She took a sip of her tea, hiding her face behind the mug. But I saw the tear track through the dirt on her cheek. "The Watcher," she repeated. "I like that. It sounds necessary." "It is," I said, "just like you." I stayed until the stars came out. The sky out here was vast, a canopy of diamonds that made the jewels Vanessa had stolen look like cheap glass. When I finally stood to leave, Margot didn't walk me to the car. She stood on the porch of her new home, a small, dark figure against the warm glow of the solar lights inside. "Barbara," she called out as I reached the tree line. I turned back. "Do not come back too often," she shouted, her voice gruff again. "I have work to do, and so do you." "I won't," I promised, smiling. "But I will know you are here." "I am always here," she said. I walked back through the forest, guided by the light of the moon. I was leaving the wilderness behind, but I was taking a part of it with me. The ice that had entered my heart during that blizzard hadn't melted entirely. It had tempered. It had turned into a spine of steel. I reached my car and drove back toward the city lights that glowed on the horizon. I was going back to the noise, to the fight, to the world of men who thought they could own everything. But as I drove, I touched the small wooden figure Margot had been whittling. She had slipped it into my pocket when I hugged her goodbye. It was a wolf, rough, jagged, but undeniably fierce. I placed it on the dashboard. The victim was dead. The survivor had healed, and the woman driving the car was ready for whatever came next. The gavel slammed down against the mahogany sound block, and the noise echoed through the packed courtroom like a gunshot. It was a sharp, final sound, one that severed the last thread connecting me to the nightmare of the past year. "In the matter of the people versus Gavin Lockwood and Vanessa Tate," the judge intoned, his voice devoid of pity, "on the charges of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, attempted murder, wire fraud, and grand larceny, this court finds the defendants guilty on all counts." I sat in the front row, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I was wearing white today, not the crimson of revenge, but the white of a blank page, a new beginning, beside me. Richard nodded slowly, a satisfied tightness around his eyes. "Gavin Lockwood," the judge continued, looking over his spectacles at the man standing at the defense table. Gavin was gaunt, his once thick hair thinning from stress, his skin pasty from a year in county jail, but he stood straight, his eyes fixed on a point in the middle distance, his jaw set in defiance. Due to the heinous nature of the crime, the premeditation involved, and the complete lack of remorse shown throughout these proceedings, You are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." A wail erupted from the other side of the table. Vanessa collapsed into her chair, sobbing hysterically. She had given birth in prison 4 months ago to a son she was immediately separated from. The state had taken custody, and the child was now with a foster family in Montana, far away from the toxicity of his biological parents. Her sentence was identical: life. The judge had not been moved by her tears or her claims of coercion. The evidence, the texts, the video, the laughter had been too damning. "Order!" the judge commanded as the gallery began to buzz. I looked at Gavin. I expected him to scream. I expected him to beg. I expected the mask to crumble as it had on the night of his arrest. But he did not scream. Instead, he turned his head slowly and locked eyes with me, and then he smiled. It was a small, tight smile, a smile that did not reach his eyes. It was the smile of a man who knows a secret. A chill went down my spine, sharper than the wind on Blackwood Ridge. Why was he smiling? He had just lost everything. He was going to die in a concrete box. As the bailiffs moved in to cuff him, he mouthed 2 words to me: "Not over." I frowned. Richard touched my arm. "It is done. Barbara, let's go. The press is waiting." I stood up, shaking off the unease. He was just trying to scare me. It was the last gasp of a powerless narcissist. He had no assets. He had no allies. He was a toothless wolf. Or so I thought. What I did not know, what even Elias had missed in his exhaustive audit, was that Gavin was a creature of redundancy. He had one account we hadn't found: a cryptocurrency wallet stored on a physical drive he had buried in his mother's backyard years ago. Just in case, through a network of jailhouse whispers and bribed guards, he had accessed it. He had moved $200,000 to a contract killer, a man known in the underworld simply as the Mechanic. Gavin didn't want to appeal. He didn't want a retrial. He wanted me dead. He figured if he was going to hell, he was going to drag me down with him. I walked out of the courthouse doors and into the blinding flash of the afternoon sun. The steps were crowded with microphones and cameras. The world wanted a statement from the Ice Queen who had melted the hearts of the jury. "Mrs. Lockwood, Mrs. Lockwood, how do you feel? Is it true you are writing a book? What will happen to the company now?" I stopped at the top of the stairs, Richard flanking me. I raised a hand, and the crowd quieted. "Justice was served today," I said, my voice carrying over the noise of the city. "That is all that matters. Now, I would like to go home." I began to descend the wide stone steps toward the curb where Elias was waiting with the car. I was halfway down when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. The roar of an engine. It wasn't the idle hum of city traffic. It was the high-pitched scream of a V8 engine being redlined. I looked up. A dark gray sedan, windows tinted black, had jumped the curb 200 feet away. It was tearing across the plaza, smashing through a wooden bench, sending pigeons scattering in a terrified cloud. It was moving fast, 60, maybe 70 miles per hour, and it was aiming directly at me. "Barbara, move!" Elias screamed, leaping out of the car. Time dilated. I saw the grille of the car. I saw the sunlight glinting off the hood. I knew, with a terrifying mathematical certainty, that I could not move fast enough. I was frozen, just like I had been in the snow. The car barreled closer. 100 feet, 50 feet. The crowd screamed and scattered. I braced for impact, closing my eyes, waiting for the crushing weight of metal in the darkness. But the impact never came. Instead, there was a high-pitched electronic whine, a sound so piercing it made my teeth ache. The gray sedan, now only 20 feet away, suddenly jerked violently to the left. It wasn't a drift or a swerve. It looked as if a giant, invisible hand had grabbed the front axle and yanked it sideways. The wheels locked up. The engine sputtered and died instantly. The car's momentum carried it forward in a skid, but it was no longer aimed at me. It spun out of control, missing me by inches. I felt the wind of its passing ruffle my skirt and slammed head-on into a massive concrete light pole. Crunch. Metal crumpled like paper. Steam hissed from the shattered radiator. The car sat there, wrapped around the pole, smoking and ruined. I stood there, shaking, untouched. Richard grabbed me, pulling me behind a pillar. "My God, are you hit? Are you hit?" "I am fine," I gasped, staring at the wreck. "What happened? He just turned." "He did not turn," Elias said, running up to us, his gun drawn. "That car died before it hit the pole. The electronics fried." I looked across the plaza. Parked on the street, unnoticed in the chaos, was an old rusted pickup truck. The window was rolled down. A woman was sitting in the driver's seat. She was wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a flannel shirt. She held a strange device in her hand, a black box with several antennas, pointing directly at the wrecked sedan. She lowered the box, looked at me across the terrified crowd, and gave a single, sharp nod. It was Margot. My breath caught in my throat. She wasn't just watching the forest. She had been watching me. The engineer who hated technology had built a weapon to defeat it. She must have known. She must have been tracking Gavin's movements, his contacts, in ways even Elias hadn't thought to look. She had followed the threat to its source. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police swarmed the wrecked car. They pulled the driver out, a man with a long criminal record and a contract in his pocket. He was unconscious, but alive. I looked back at the truck, but it was gone. Margot had vanished into the traffic, a ghost in the machine. The investigation that followed was swift and brutal. With the driver in custody and facing a botched assassination charge, he sang like a canary. He gave up the payment source. The FBI cyber forensics team traced the cryptocurrency transfer. It led back to a digital wallet accessed from a contraband smartphone found in Gavin's cell block mattress. It was the final thread. The authorities seized the wallet. It contained $3 million, money Gavin had squirreled away from kickbacks years before I even met him. It was his escape fund, his bribe fund, his kill my wife fund. Now it was government property. 2 days later, I went back to the prison. This time, I didn't go to the visitation room. I had Richard pull strings. I wanted to see him in the holding cell where they were keeping him before his transfer to the Supermax facility in Florence, Colorado. I stood outside the bars. Gavin was sitting on his cot. He looked up when I arrived. He looked different now. The smugness was gone. The defiance was gone. He looked like a man who had fallen off a cliff and was still waiting to hit the bottom. "You are hard to kill," Gavin whispered. He didn't even try to deny it. "And you are bad at killing," I replied. "You outsource too much." I reached through the bars and tossed a manila envelope onto his lap. "What is this?" he asked, his hands trembling as he picked it up. "Open it." He opened the flap. He pulled out 2 photographs. The first was a picture of the gray sedan wrapped around the light pole. The second was a copy of the federal asset forfeiture order, seizing the contents of his crypto wallet. The balance at the bottom read, $0. Gavin stared at the paper. His face went gray. His mouth opened, a soundless gasp escaping his lips. "That was it, wasn't it?" I asked softly. "That was your safety net. That was the money you were going to use to buy protection inside. That was the money you were going to use to pay for an appeal. That was your hope." He looked up at me, terror flooding his eyes. "Barbara, you cannot leave me here with nothing. They will kill me, without money. I am a target. I have enemies here." "You made your choices," I said, my voice cold as the deep winter ice. "You threw me into a blizzard, Gavin. You took my coat. You took my shoes. You left me to freeze in the dark because you wanted my money." I gripped the cold steel bars of his cell. "Well, now the tables have turned. I have stripped you of everything, your freedom, your reputation, your mistress, your son, and now, your last dime." "Please," he begged, falling to his knees on the concrete floor. "Barbara, please, send me something. Just a few $100s for the commissary. Just so I can buy food. Please." I looked down at him. I remembered the way he had looked at me in the car when he told me I was going to die. I remembered the indifference. "I will send you nothing," I said. "You wanted a cold, dark place? You have one." I stepped back. "You tried to give me a winter that would end my life," I told him. "So I am giving you a winter that will never end. You will live the rest of your life in this cage, cold, alone, and forgotten. No one is coming for you. No one is watching you. You are buried alive. Gavin. And this time, there is no spring." "Barbara!" he screamed, lunging for the bars. "Come back! You owe me! I made you!" I turned and walked down the long, echoing corridor. His screams followed me, bouncing off the walls, growing fainter and fainter until they were just a whisper in the dark. Clang. The heavy door to the cell block slammed shut behind me. The silence that followed was absolute. I walked out of the prison. It was late afternoon. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue. And then I felt it. A touch on my cheek. Cold, wet. I looked up. The first snow of the next winter was beginning to fall. Tiny, delicate flakes drifted down from the heavens, dancing in the sunlight. A year ago, this snow would have terrified me. It would have meant death. It would have meant pain. I held out my hand. A snowflake landed on my palm. I watched it for a moment, marveling at its geometry. It didn't burn. It didn't bite. It just melted, turning into a drop of pure, clean water. I smiled. "It is not cold," I whispered to myself. "It is just weather." I walked to the curb. A silver Land Rover was idling there. The window rolled down. Margot was sitting in the passenger seat. She had cleaned up a bit. She wore a new flannel shirt and her hair was tied back. But her eyes were the same, wild, knowing. She held up a thermos. "Tea?" she asked. "Tea sounds perfect," I said. I climbed into the driver's seat. I looked at the prison one last time, a gray fortress of misery in the rearview mirror. Then I looked at Margot. Then I looked at the road ahead, winding up toward the mountains, toward the sanctuary we had built, toward the future. I put the car in gear. "Where to?" Margot asked. "Wherever we want," I replied. I pressed the gas. The car surged forward, tires gripping the asphalt, leaving the shadow of the prison behind. We drove toward the setting sun, toward the warmth, leaving the past locked behind a gate that would never open again. The winter was over, the hunt was done, and for the first time in a long time, I was not just surviving, I was living. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey of betrayal, survival, and ultimate justice. I would love to hear your thoughts. Please tell us in the comments where you are listening from and what you would have done if you were in Barbara's shoes. Do not forget to subscribe to Scarlet Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people. Your support means the world to us.